The most dangerous moment in Joseph Campbell's hero's journey is not when you face the dragon or cross into the unknown realm. It is when you first realize that everyone around you, including the person you thought you were, has been sleepwalking through existence for years. This is not about becoming antisocial or rejecting human connection. This is about recognizing that what Campbell called the ordinary world was never ordinary at all, but rather an elaborate collective dream from which most people never awaken. You have sat in countless meetings, nodding at conversations that felt hollow, smiled through social gatherings where everyone seemed to be performing rather than living, found yourself asking questions that no one else appeared to hear echoing in the spaces between their words. This moment of recognition, this sudden clarity that life has become mechanical, predictable, and strangely empty, is not the crisis most people believe it to be. It is the first stirring of what Campbell understood as the mythic consciousness that lies dormant within every human soul, waiting for the right conditions to emerge from its long slumber. Most people mistake this awakening for depression or social dysfunction because they have been conditioned to believe that adaptation to unconscious patterns equals mental health, that fitting seamlessly into collective hypnosis represents successful living. But something deeper is calling to you now. Something that recognizes the difference between existing and truly being alive. You have begun to notice how most people move through their days, like actors who have forgotten they are in a play, speaking lines they never consciously chose, following scripts written by forces they have never questioned. The conversations repeat with predictable rhythms. The complaints cycle through familiar patterns. The very personalities people claim as uniquely their own reveal themselves as collections of learned responses and cultural programming. Campbell knew that this seeing is the threshold guardian of the hero's journey, not a monster to be defeated, but a moment of truth to be embraced. The ordinary world must be recognized as a kind of spell before the hero can begin the work of breaking free from its invisible chains. This is why the awakening often feels so isolating at first. You are beginning to see with eyes that are no longer clouded by the same illusions that comfort those around you, and this clarity creates a natural distance between your inner reality and the social performances that once satisfied you. The mythic traditions understood this phase as essential preparation for what lies ahead. Every hero must first become aware of their imprisonment before they can begin the journey toward liberation. But this awareness comes with its own unique challenges, because once you recognize the mechanical nature of most human interaction, you cannot simply return to unconscious participation. The masks become visible, the games reveal themselves as games, and the very foundations of what you once accepted as reality begin to shift beneath your feet. This is not a breakdown, it is a breakthrough disguised as disillusionment. Campbell wrote extensively about how the hero's journey begins, not with a dramatic call to adventure, but with a quiet, persistent sense that the life being lived is somehow inauthentic, that beneath all the social roles and cultural expectations, a truer way of being is struggling to emerge. You find yourself increasingly unable to pretend enthusiasm for things that feel meaningless, increasingly resistant to conversations that go nowhere, increasingly aware of the profound difference between connection and mere social contact. What emerges in these moments of clarity is the recognition that you have been living someone else's definition of success, someone else's version of happiness, someone else's idea of what it means to be human. The hero's journey cannot begin until this recognition crystallizes into conscious awareness, because only then can you begin to distinguish between what is authentically yours and what you have simply inherited from the sleeping world around you. Campbell understood that the hero's call to adventure rarely arrives as a thunderbolt or burning bush. More often, it whispers through growing dissatisfaction with the very things that once provided comfort and identity. This is the phase he described as the crossing of the first threshold, though it happens not through dramatic action, but through internal recognition that the familiar world of unconscious patterns no longer feels like home. You begin to experience what he called the solitude of the seeker, which is not the loneliness of rejection but something far more mysterious and profound, the natural result of beginning to see life with eyes that are no longer willing to participate in collective illusions. This solitude emerges because authentic seeing creates a peculiar form of isolation. When you start to perceive clearly, you realize that most people are having conversations with their own projections rather than with each other, pursuing goals that were implanted rather than consciously chosen, defending beliefs they have never actually examined with their own minds and hearts. You find yourself at gatherings where everyone is speaking, but no one is saying anything that touches the deeper currents of human experience, where people are connecting, but not truly meeting, where the entire social fabric seems held together by agreements that no one remembers making. Campbell recognized this threshold crossing as perhaps the most difficult part of the entire heroic journey, because it requires learning to live with a clarity that sees through the illusions that comfort most people. Once you recognize that status is costume jewelry, that most social interactions are elaborate performances designed to avoid authentic contact, that the very personalities people defend so fiercely are often just collections of habitual responses, you can never again participate in these things with the same innocence that once made them bearable. But here is what the ancient wisdom traditions understood about this necessary solitude. It is not punishment, but preparation. Every hero must spend time in what Campbell called the wilderness of their own consciousness, must learn to be comfortable with themselves when all external supports and validations have been stripped away. This is where you discover whether your identity depends entirely on social confirmation or whether something deeper exists within you that remains steady regardless of what others think, say, or believe about who you are. The mythic traditions called this meeting the mentor, but the true mentor at this stage is often silence itself, those quiet spaces between social performances where you are not trying to be anyone in particular for anyone else's benefit. In these moments of authentic solitude, something begins to emerge that has always been present, but was hidden beneath layers of conditioning and cultural programming. You start to sense that there is a genuine self beneath all the roles you have learned to play, a true voice beneath all the scripts you have memorized, an authentic way of being that has nothing to do with meeting expectations or gaining approval. This recognition transforms solitude from something to be feared into something essential. You need time away from the constant input of other people's opinions, needs, and projections in order to hear your own inner voice speaking truths that cannot be heard above the noise of collective unconsciousness. You need space to stop performing and start discovering, silence to distinguish between what is truly yours and what you have simply borrowed from the world around you without conscious consideration. The hero's journey always includes this withdrawal from ordinary social life, not as an escape from humanity, but as preparation for a deeper, more authentic form of engagement. Campbell wrote about the courage to be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you into someone else. And this courage can only be developed in solitude, in those quiet spaces where you are accountable only to your own deepest truth and the mysterious forces that guide authentic transformation. If these words are touching something that has been stirring within you, if you recognize yourself in this description of the threshold between mechanical living and conscious existence, then you are not alone in this ancient journey that has been walked by awakening souls throughout human history. I invite you to join our circle of fellow travelers who understand that the greatest adventure is not found in external achievements, but in the depths of consciousness itself. Share in the comments what signs of this awakening you have noticed in your own life. Sometimes naming these experiences helps us recognize that we are not losing our minds, but finding them in a world that has forgotten what true sanity looks like. What Campbell identified as the encounter with the shadow represents one of the most challenging and transformative phases of the heroic journey, though it rarely unfolds in the dramatic ways that popular interpretations suggest. The shadow that the awakening hero must face is not merely personal darkness or repressed emotions, though it certainly includes these elements. It is the recognition of the vast web of collective unconsciousness that operates on every level of human society, creating what Campbell understood as mechanical relationships, mechanical thinking, and mechanical ways of moving through life that most people mistake for conscious choice. As your vision continues to clear through this process of inner awakening, you begin to witness something both heartbreaking and illuminating. How much human suffering stems not from external circumstances, but from internal blindness to the forces that shape thought, emotion, and behavior. You observe people defending positions they have never truly examined, pursuing goals that create misery rather than fulfillment, maintaining relationships that diminish their essential humanity, supporting systems that contradict their deepest values, all while remaining completely convinced They are exercising free will and making conscious decisions. This phase of the journey brings a profound temptation that Campbell warned about extensively, the temptation to become bitter, superior, or permanently withdrawn from human society. You may find yourself thinking that you see what others cannot see, that you have somehow transcended the human condition, while those around you remain trapped within unconscious patterns. But Campbell understood that this attitude represents another form of sleep, another way of avoiding the real work that the hero's journey demands. The true hero learns to see clearly without judgment, to understand the mechanics of unconsciousness without condemning those who remain unconscious, to recognize illusion without feeling superior to those who still find comfort in familiar deceptions. This requires holding two apparently contradictory truths simultaneously. You must see clearly what is false, mechanical, and unconscious in human behavior, including your own patterns, while maintaining compassion for the human condition and recognizing that unconsciousness is not a moral failing, but a stage of development that everyone must transcend in their own time and their own way. The real test of this phase reveals itself in relationships. Can you love someone while clearly seeing their unconscious patterns? Can you maintain genuine friendships with people who are still playing social games that no longer interest you? Can you work within systems whose operating principles you have outgrown? Can you participate in a culture whose values feel increasingly foreign to your awakening consciousness? The hero must learn to live in the world without being of the world, to engage with life without losing clarity, to remain open-hearted while maintaining clear sight. This is where you discover something remarkable that Campbell wrote about extensively. People who are genuinely ready for their own awakening will be drawn to your authenticity like recognition, calling to recognition. Not because you preach or teach or try to convince anyone of anything, but because something in them recognizes something in you. There is a quality that emerges in people who have stopped pretending, stopped performing, stopped trying to be what others want them to be, and this quality creates a magnetic field for others who are ready for their own journey into authentic living. But you also discover that many relationships cannot survive this transformation into greater authenticity. People who need you to remain unconscious in order to feel comfortable with their own sleep will gradually distance themselves from you. Friendships built on shared complaints dissolve when you stop complaining. Professional relationships based on mutual manipulation become impossible when you withdraw your participation in unconscious games. Family dynamics that depend on your cooperation in dysfunctional patterns shift or break when you stop providing the responses that maintain familiar but unhealthy cycles. This creates the particular loneliness that Campbell wrote about, not the loneliness of being rejected by others, but the loneliness of being authentic in a world where most interactions are based on mutually agreed-upon performances that everyone pretends are real. Yet it is precisely in this loneliness that you make a profound discovery. You would rather be alone with truth than together with illusion, would rather have one genuine conversation than 100 superficial exchanges, would rather stand in integrity by yourself than compromise your hard-won clarity for the sake of social comfort. If you have experienced this strange combination of isolation and clarity, this bittersweet recognition of what is authentic and what is performance in human relationships, then know that your journey matters not only for your own liberation, but for the collective awakening that humanity desperately needs. Subscribe to continue exploring these depths with others who understand, and remember, you are not becoming strange or antisocial. You are becoming genuinely human, in ways this world has forgotten but urgently needs to remember. The ultimate destination of Campbell's hero's journey, as he understood it through his study of mythological traditions across cultures, is not escape from the ordinary world, but return to it carrying what he called the boon, a gift of wisdom and authentic presence that can serve the collective healing that humanity requires. But the hero who returns from this inner odyssey is no longer the same person who began the journey into consciousness. They have learned to live from a place of inner stillness that no external circumstance can fundamentally disturb, have discovered that their true identity exists independent of social roles, personal history, or future achievements, have found what mystics throughout history have described as the peace that passeth understanding. This peace emerges not because the awakened hero has avoided life's inevitable difficulties and challenges, but because they have learned to remain centered within those challenges, rooted in something deeper than the surface turbulence that characterizes most human experience. They have discovered the paradox that Campbell understood so profoundly. The hero must leave the world of unconscious participation in order to truly inhabit it with conscious presence. They must withdraw from mechanical engagement in order to return with authentic availability. They must stop playing the games that everyone else seems to find so compelling in order to discover what lies beyond all games. Living from this place of integration becomes an art that must be learned through patient practice and continuous refinement. You discover that you can participate in social situations without losing your essential center, can engage in professional requirements without compromising your integrity, can maintain relationships without pretending to be someone you are not, for the sake of others' comfort or approval. You learn to speak the language that others understand, while remaining inwardly aligned with truths that cannot be easily spoken, becoming like a translator between the world of unconscious living and the emerging world of awakened presence. The profound secret that reveals itself at this stage of the journey is that the very qualities the sleeping world once rejected in you, your refusal to participate in collective illusions, your inability to pretend enthusiasm for things that felt meaningless, your persistent insistence on authenticity even when it created social discomfort. These are exactly what the world needs most, though few people are yet ready to recognize this gift. Not everyone will understand what you have become, but those who are prepared for their own journey toward consciousness will be transformed by contact with someone who has learned to live from truth rather than from conditioning. You find that your presence alone becomes a form of teaching, though you are not trying to teach anyone anything. People begin to sense something around you that they cannot name, but find mysteriously attractive, a quality of peace, of genuineness, of freedom from the anxiety that drives most human behavior. You are simply being yourself without apology or explanation, and that authentic being creates a field of possibility around you that others can feel even when they cannot understand what they are feeling. Campbell wrote that the ultimate freedom of the hero is the freedom to live, not in the sense of doing whatever one wants without consideration for consequences, but in the sense of being fully present to what is actually happening rather than being lost in mental projections about what might happen or regrets about what has already occurred. This quality of presence transforms ordinary activities into something approaching the sacred. Washing dishes becomes meditation, walking becomes prayer, simple conversation becomes communion with the mystery of consciousness itself. Perhaps the most profound discovery of this final integration is that the loneliness you experience during the middle phases of the journey gradually transforms into a different kind of solitude, one that feels full rather than empty, connected rather than isolated from the essential currents of life. You realize that you are never actually alone because you are always in relationship with the fundamental mystery of existence itself. The silence that once felt like absence now reveals itself as presence. The space between thoughts becomes alive with infinite possibility. The ordinary world unveils itself as anything but ordinary. This is what Campbell meant when he wrote about the hero's final achievement, learning to live simultaneously in the world of practical necessities and the world of eternal truths, paying bills and meeting responsibilities while remaining connected to something vast and timeless, engaging with the temporal while being rooted in dimensions of experience that transcend time. The journey never truly ends because consciousness itself continues evolving, deepening, discovering new territories of truth and beauty. But what does end is the compulsive seeking, the desperate grasping, the endless anxiety about whether you are living correctly. You settle into a way of being that is both fully human and mysteriously more than human, not because you have transcended the human condition, but because you have finally learned to embrace it completely with conscious love.